only Playbook fans, it is officially playoff season for the NFL. The fantasy world is over. The real football begins now, and we are still here to talk all about it. We're going to recap the last week of the NFL, the regular season. A lot of games did not really matter at all. Some games had some implications, so we'll try to highlight the games that matter, and we're going to hand out our year-end awards for fantasy football. So a lot of good stuff to cover today. I have the full house. Shashot is here. Got some time off from doing his doctor stuff. Shovit, usual suspects. How are you guys doing here after the regular season? This is the last episode of 2022 regular season football.
Doing pretty good. I mean, it's sad, but playoffs, it should be fun. I mean, there's a lot of good competition coming up. So, just it's been good. Good year so far.
Yeah, if there's one word to describe it, it's not sad for me. It's fucking relieved. I am so relieved. That was crazy end to my NFL regular season because I got to barely watch a couple of weeks and I was panicking. Like people are like, "Are you okay? Like, why are you like looking at your phone so much?" I'm like, "You wouldn't understand, man. You wouldn't understand."
Yeah, dude, I can't imagine. I can't imagine having to go from like football being, everything and anything to just like you're forced to not have it be that. Like it's just such a drastic, yeah, it's just such a drastic shift. I would be like, what? How do I even do this? Like, I don't even know. But
you don't do it.
Yeah, you're still doing it. You're still doing it, and you're still on the episodes that you can make. So obviously, given the only playbook your time, we are greatly appreciative of that. Without further ado, let's kick things off, guys. Let's run through water cooler talk. With the playoffs officially set, let's run through the matchups in the first round. In the AFC, the Chiefs officially secured the first round bye. They're not going to play a game in the first round, so they get to rest up, get their guys healthy. So the number 2 seed is the Buffalo Bills. They are going to be hosting a divisional rival, the Miami Dolphins. Still some injury concerns there, whether they're going to have Tua. If they don't have Tua, I mean, does anybody really expect that to be a game? Even if they have Tua, in my opinion, I don't really expect that to be a game. But Buffalo is 2 versus Miami, who is the 7th seed. Cincinnati is the 3rd seed. They're going to be hosting the Baltimore Ravens, which, again, that situation's weird. Who's their quarterback going to be? If it's not Lamar Jackson, again, does anybody really expect the Ravens to win that game in Cincinnati? No. I don't know. Number 4 seed, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who won that matchup in Week 18 against Tennessee. They are hosting a playoff game, and this one probably is the best matchup in the AFC. They're going to host the LA Chargers, so a battle of 2 young quarterbacks, up-and-coming offenses, hopefully that can get things going. That should be a fun matchup with the 4 and 5 seed. Over in the NFC, the Eagles got the bye, as we expected them to. They kind of had it all year, got a little scary at the end, but they took care of business. Number 2 seed, the San Francisco 49ers, with Brock Purdy, Big Cock Brock at the helm. They are going to host the Seattle Seahawks. So another divisional matchup. They've already played twice. San Francisco's won 2 times in a row. So that's the only narrative that I'm latching onto that leads me to believe this isn't going to be a blowout. Division games, 3rd time you're playing the same team, anything can happen. The Minnesota Vikings got the number 3 seed. They're going to host an NFL or in a playoff game in their new stadium. They're going to take on the New York Giants. Already played the Giants once this year, had to win the game with the 61-yard field goal. So I'm expecting this matchup to be just that close. It's going to come down to the wire, and I have no idea who's going to end up winning. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the ugly, disgusting 2022 season, Tampa Bay Buccaneers still win their division. Tom Brady gets a home playoff game, and obviously they get to face the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm sure Cowboys fans are sweating. That's probably not the best first round matchup. I mean, honestly, I probably would have played the Vikings, the Giants, the Seahawks, even the 49ers over the Buccaneers in the playoffs, just because it's Tom Brady on the other side. And shit, man, in the playoffs, it's terrifying whether he's 45 or 25. That is the playoff picture for this for 2022, I guess. And real quickly, let's run through the draft order. The biggest thing that we'll highlight is the fact that the Houston Texans had the opportunity to get the number 1 overall pick, and they did not do that. They won their game by going for 2. So they officially Lovie Smith handed his former team the number 1 overall pick. The Chicago Bears are going to have the first round pick. They're going to have over $100 million in cap space, and they have their quarterback of the future. So look out for that Chicago Bears team in 2023. Houston has the number 2 pick. They do also have another first round pick, so maybe they're not as concerned about getting the first overall pick. Arizona with Kyler Murray there. Who knows if he's going to stay there? Cliff Kingsbury's fired, so they got a brand new regime. They're going to draft 3rd. Indianapolis with another coach that's probably not going to be there next year gets the 4th pick, and Seattle gets the 5th pick despite being in the playoffs because of Denver and that Russell Wilson trade. Detroit rounds out number 6. They get the number 6 pick because of the Matthew Stafford trade. Vegas at 7, Atlanta at 8, Carolina at 9, and Philly having the first round bye still gets to draft 10th overall because that's just how they do in Philly. That rounds out the top 10. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about it in the matchup, but I want to kind of get where your guys' heads at with the whole Chicago or with the whole Houston matchup. So let's get into the action, guys. If you don't have anything else for me regarding the playoff picture or the draft order, let's kick the rundown off.
Draft order. Why don't you, if people are worried about Fields' throwing abilities, why not trade him now? And just get some capital because you're going to get to draft a whole new quarterback that you can restart with, right? That's a thought that has to be in play in Chicago right now.
Yeah, I don't want to feel that fire with the whole not believing in Fields, but that was my first thought. Is I'm like, you have an opportunity here where you've seen Fields for 2 seasons. Yeah, obviously his team is bad, but I still don't excuse how bad his passing performances have been. So yeah, you could choose not to pay him. You can move on from him. You can trade him. There's still a tremendous amount of value for Fields, and like you said, you're going to get your pick at who you want to start your franchise over with. So it is an interesting predicament to be in.
And don't forget, like, running quarterbacks don't last very long. Look at Lamar right now. Like, he's young yet he's hobbled. Like, careers are made with being in the pocket. So if you can get that out of the draft and get more picks along the way, entertain that thought.
Yeah, I think that I saw the report that the GM was like, they've got to see something exceptional from this QB class to decide to go away from Fields. I think that's going to be a tough decision, but I think if you can get picks, like you said, that could work out.
They're in a great spot. They can trade down and accumulate capital. They can trade Fields and accumulate capital. They can do nothing and basically again draft whoever they want, right? So yeah, I mean the best rebuilding situation heading into this offseason by far is for the Chicago Bears. As long as their ownership and everybody doesn't fuck this up. I mean, this is like the ideal rebuild if you're a new GM that you could have possibly wanted, right? You had signs of life from your offense. Your quarterback is showing signs of being the quarterback of the future. You're getting the first round pick and you have the most money available to spend. So again, it's like Christmas for Ryan Poles heading into 2023. That's it for Water Cooler Talk. Let's get into the action with the rundown. The first game on the board on Saturday, the Kansas City Chiefs were traveling to Vegas to take on the Raiders. Chiefs needed a win to secure that first seed and the first round bye, and they did that. They covered the 9-point spread. They win the game 31-13. The Raiders lose. They are now going to draft 7th overall in the 2023 draft. I just want to kick off this segment by saying just don't have week 18 finals. Like, let's try to get away from that heading into next year. Even week 17 seems a little far-fetched. Like, there's just no reason to be in a situation where you're playing. Like, I looked at the scores of our week 18 playoffs in my league that playoffs matter. And like, you're in the pickle of starting guys like Hurts, starting guys like Daniel Jones, starting guys like Justin Herbert, even all these guys that played like one half of football. And yeah, your opponent also had a quarterback that played one half of football, but do you really want to be in a matchup where your star quarterback that's supposed to score 25 plus points is scoring like 9-11. The final score is like 73-72. Like, it's not as fun as it can be in the last week of the season is kind of what I'll say from my experience. Yes, I still got the W, but yeah, I had Hurts play, I think he played almost the whole game. He played.
How many points did you win by total at the end?
I think like 45 or 50, something like that.
That would be without Mixon and Burrow's points from that one game, right? So that could have been.
Yeah, but I also had Chase. So honestly, I think at the end of the day, I would have pulled it off. But yeah, you're right. He could have thrown all of his touchdowns to Higgins, and Chase could have had a bad game, and I probably would have lost that matchup. So that situation in itself is so unorthodox. I don't know that we'll ever run into something like that again. Never say never, but it's very 1 in a million. But the aspect of controlling your league's rules and not having week 18 playoffs, everybody can control that. So let's just do away with that because there's not a ton of fantasy advice to give in the last week because we have no idea what the coaches are thinking. We don't know how much they're going to play their players. We can only gather the information they present to the public. And it's like the last week of the season. So they play a lot of chess games. It's like, oh, we're going to play our guys. And then they play a couple of drives and they sit. Or, oh, we're going to rest our players. And they play the whole game and your star receiver gets hurt like the Chargers did. So, there's a lot of ramifications that you just shouldn't have to stress about or worry about. So heading into 2023, everybody's New Year's resolution that plays fantasy football, make sure your league does not have week 18 matchups. But with that being said, the Chiefs took care of business here. They win the game. But the reason I bring that all up is the Chiefs won 31-13. If you were like, oh, great, the Chiefs need to play for the bye, so I'm going to, unload all of my Chiefs. They won this game so easily that, none of their players really had great fantasy days. Patty had 15 fantasy points. He ends the year as QB1, which is pretty impressive considering that I think Allen was getting drafted consistently over him in fantasy football. Isaiah Pacheco had 12.4 fantasy points. Jerick McKinnon found the end zone, but was otherwise pretty insignificant, 7.5 points. Kelsey, you were like, oh, great. I have Kelsey, who's like the best tight end in all of fantasy football. He's such a mismatch in positions or matchups. He only had 6.8 points. The star of the Kansas City Chiefs was their defense with 15 fantasy points. So again, that goes to show you, if you went into week 18, you're like, shit, the Chiefs got to play. And I have, a Kelsey Mahomes stack. I'm guaranteed to win. Well, they combined for 20 fantasy points. So you probably could have lost playing against somebody who started Jared Stidham and Zach Moss. Like that's the kind of shit that you're dealing with in week 18. Is it worth it? I don't know. You guys be the deciding factors there. Jared Stidham on the other side, 13.6 fantasy points. Jacobs, number one running back heading into the season or heading into the final week, got 6 fantasy points. Adams, who had been disappearing the last couple of games after the monster performance in week 17, only 9.8. I don't think anybody started Hunter Renfrow, who had 15.8. You might have started Waller, who had 4.5, and Carlson, the kicker, was probably the one guy that was played the most in this offense, and he got 9 fantasy points. So suffice to say, it's just the last week of the season. Anything can happen. We can sit here and speculate as much as we want, but we have no fucking idea. So the coaches don't even know. They're scoreboard watching. And, when the team that you're needing to lose is up in the first quarter, they're making decisions based off of that. So it's all real time, and fantasy football is not real time. You're locking in your lineups before the game starts. So that is my soapbox rant. I am officially off that. Chiefs win the game. They secure the number 1 pick. Shoshot, take us to the next game.
All right. Yeah. First of all, why is anybody in an 18-week fantasy season? That shouldn't even be allowed. I haven't done one of those in like 10 years. But that being said, put me in a league with 18 weeks of football. I guarantee you I'm going to be coming out on top more than most people, just because there's more variables to play with in the finals, right? Like I've lost so many finals now. And if I just imagine having a week 18 in all those finals, like I'm the guy that's losing sleep because I'm looking at everything that happens before that game starts, right? I know my opponent is not doing that. So like there's going to be things that you're going to have an advantage over the other guy, like knowing like the backup to Patrick Mahomes, getting that last minute advice. People don't have the energy to maintain that for 18 weeks, right? Like, but some people are just going to do it. And if, those scenarios come up, like you just have to be that person that takes that extra leap in that last final game. That's why I say I'm relieved, because like it was a stressful year, bro. Like that, 2 second places and 1 like 8th or 9th place. I don't know how that shit works, but in order to maintain that for longer, like it's very stressful. So 18-week seasons. This just doesn't make any sense. Stop it. The game that really was the most interesting to me early on in the week was the Titans visiting the Jaguars. A lot in stake here, Final score was 16-20. Jaguars took that win. And, they didn't do it in a flashy way or anything like that. They just kind of were the less worse team out there. And, the division's garbage. 9-8 led them to take, advantage of a first playoff week home field advantage situation, which is just shitty, like that's not cool. We're over here having to go like 13-4, whatever the heck, and end up with 3rd seed while the Jaguars are 4th seed going 9-8. It's just some of these things are just whack. But anyways, all that being said, there's not much fantasy implications that we really should even be talking about. But Dobbs has shown some signs of like being a legit NFL backup, so he kind of got 12-ish points in a game that really mattered, which you would have kind of expected him to take a little bit of a leap with Henry back there, just taking all the pressure. But he didn't. And Henry, 30 carries, man. Like everybody knew the ball was going to Henry. He got 109 yards out of the 30 carries, which is pretty bad if you really think about it. But his longevity is what we have to respect here. And 30 carries to get that 100 yards is pretty good from a fantasy perspective. He had 1 catch for almost 20 yards and ended up with 16 fantasy points. Okonkwo, the dude that, next season should be targeted just like everybody else in that second tier of wide receivers after Kelsey. If you're going with the no tight end strategy, you can easily scoop him up in like whatever round, 10th, 11th, 12th, something like that, maybe even later. 3 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown. He's going to continue to do that there because they're really believing in him. All the coaching staff, everybody loves him. Burks, he needs a real QB to excel. He has that potential there, but he's not going to do shit if they don't have a legit quarterback in Tennessee by the beginning of next year. Trevor Lawrence, this was like his game manager type of game. He just played really safe. 20 for 32, 212 yards, 1 touchdown, and then didn't do anything on the ground, which is really where the money is at. And we didn't get to see that, well, I don't know how many points he ended up with, like 12, maybe 15, I forget, maybe 12. But if he had that 40 yards that he typically gets every game, then it would have probably made it a little bit more respectable. But that's the thing with T-Law. He's still at that point where you have to get those rushing yards here and there to kind of make up for his like above average, but not that elite level fantasy play yet. And then I wrote Catholic Kirk, but I meant Christian Kirk. 21 fantasy points, man. He just, there was 3 wide receivers in every that were present in most of the teams that won the championship, and one of them was Christian Kirk. And unbelievably so. He was drafted in like the 5th round, maybe 6th, maybe 7th. I don't know. But 21 fantasy points in your final game is a huge deal, right? 6 for 8, 99 yards and a touchdown. And then Evan Ingram kind of sometimes comes up and becomes like the greatest tight end of all time, and sometimes comes up and does his best Cole Kmet without a touchdown play, and this was one of those games. But yeah, at the end of it all, Titans Jaguars, pretty meh game. There's a much better games out there this week.
Yeah, I think that it looked like the Titans had control most of the time. I mean, with the Henry running, but then it was that last. I don't remember if it was a pick six or some sort of defensive touchdown that allowed them to win the game. And I was like, oh, this is it. That's it. There's no way the Titans are going to come back.
They're not coming back from that.
Yeah, with Dobbs as their quarterback, and as good as he's played, they're just not built like that. Next up, we've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Atlanta to face the Falcons. Atlanta was favored by 4 points, given that most of the starters were out for the Buccaneers, and they covered that spread. Final score 30-17, and the over hits there. Yeah, the start. So Tom Brady was there for I want to say most of the first half, but then he wasn't there after that. There was really no need for Tom Brady to even play. Maybe trying to get that bonus. Tom Brady is like notorious for that. But he does have a touchdown in the first quarter, and so red zone Rudolph comes out of nowhere, gets a touchdown for Tom Brady. So that was pretty wild. And
what was my bet about Kyle Rudolph before the season? Do you guys remember?
Less than 50 catches or something like that.
It was either catches or touchdowns.
I want to say it might have been touchdowns. I don't know. Maybe it was catches.
Hard to predict. That would be a weird bet to have early in
the
season.
No, it's I want to say it was touchdowns, and I think it was more than one or something like that. And I think he only had 1 touchdown. That was I believe that was his only.
I think it was over under 1.5 touchdowns, and I took the under. I'm pretty sure is what it was.
Yeah. You hit that. Good call on that. Although maybe they could have used him all throughout the year, and
he's washed, bro. If he couldn't have sniffed the field when they were searching for people to catch the football, that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, no. Well, in this game, the only Buccaneer that played the whole game was Antoine Winfield Jr. Everyone else was, in and out. So really nothing to make of this. One thing I'll say from the Falcons standpoint is their run game was really well. Algier had 24 attempts, 135 yards. He sets the rookie single season rushing record with 1,035 yards. So over 1,000 yards.
That's the quietest 1,000-yard season you've seen. It felt like he didn't start playing for the team till like week 7 or 8.
He really did.
And he had over 1,000 rushing yards. That's pretty fucking incredible.
I mean, there was Huntley, there was Algier, there was Patterson in the mix. So the fact that Algier kind of shined above everyone else, and the guys, the people that started him late in the season definitely benefited from that. And as far as the Buccaneers go, Godwin fumbled, which is 2 fumbles in a row in 2 games. Buccaneers fans are probably a little bit upset about that. The season's over, so our fantasy goes, I don't really look into that. Gage gets a touchdown, but hurt on the play, so just something to monitor. And also, the Buccaneers are notorious for hamstring injuries. So Robert Hainsey has a hamstring injury, who's a center. So just something to look out for as they play the Cowboys next week. Tom Brady needs his line, and if he's getting if that line is getting hurt, that's something to be cautious about. I thought Desmond Ridder played really well against the Buccaneers backup, and so moving forward, I think that him on this team is going to benefit guys like Drake London, and hopefully Kyle Pitts even benefits next year. So things to consider. Patterson got a touchdown as well, a rushing touchdown, but with Algier kind of coming up, I think Patterson's stocks is definitely going to go down a little bit more next year. But yeah, Falcons, they win, but really don't get anything out of the win. Buccaneers are still atop NFC South, and they'll play the Cowboys next.
Yeah, impressive. Best game probably for Ritter. Obviously, it was backups, but it kind of also wasn't backups. Like they started the game with the intention to win, clearly. Otherwise, you wouldn't have played your 45-year-old quarterback in his 50th season in the NFL. There was no reason to play him, right? Aside from, which was a good point, somebody had brought up when we were watching the game show of it, the fact that he wanted to make the playoffs with a above 500 record, which seems kind of like a petty enough thing that Tom Brady would care about. That he's like, you know what, I'm not going to have a losing season and make the playoffs, so I care. But again, they benched him mid-game, and it was when they were losing, and then Blaine Gabbert was the reason they came back and won the game anyway. So again, all in all, it just did not make sense for him to even play the game. But you mentioned Drake London. Another great week, man. 6 for 120. 4 games in a row since Ritter had started. It doesn't go unnoticed that his favorite target is already Drake London. So if they're going to give Ritter an opportunity in 2023, Drake London, his stock is incredibly, is rising, is on the up and up. Patriots at Buffalo, the Bills playing their first game since the entire situation with Damar Hamlin, which obviously things have trended in the right direction. He's out of the hospital. He's, everything is slowly getting back to normal, which is, music to our ears, if, for lack of a better phrase. So we're incredibly happy about that. And Buffalo, they channeled some Damar Hamlin energy, man. Nyheim Hines was the story of this matchup, in my opinion. 2 kick returns for a touchdown, including the opening kickoff, the first play of the game, the Buffalo Bills' first play since the entire Damar Hamlin situation. I mean, you can't really write a better story than that, to be honest. That's insanity, in my opinion. So Nyheim Hines was incredible. The Bills win the game 35-23. They secure the number 2 seed. They eliminate the Patriots from the playoffs, who are now drafting 14th overall. Josh Allen actually has a nice day, 21 fantasy points. He ends the year QB2 on the season. Stephon Diggs, a nice game, almost 20 points, 19.9. He ends the year.
Just needed one more touchdown, Diggs. Just needed one more touchdown.
It was, if the Patriots could at least,
I
do
know
something. It's just
freaking
Mac
2
Jones.
picks.
Yeah. The Buffalo defense had 19 fantasy points because of those 2 picks, and they finished the year as defense number 5 in fantasy football. The running backs were bad. If you started any running backs on the Bill side, they were very bad. So you were not happy about that. I mentioned the Hines thing. That's incredible. For the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson had a great year, but kind of fell off. The uncertainty about how much they use him. And then, when other running backs come into the fold, it's just weird. He finished running back 11, finishes this game with 10.7 fantasy points. Jacoby Myers had 10.7 fantasy points, a guy that most people don't like to draft, finished wide receiver 28. And the Patriots defense ends the year as the number 1 ranked fantasy defense. So that's probably the highlight for their season. Bill Belichick has said he's not going away. Bill Belichick had that video of, him talking to DeAndre Hopkins after their game against the Cardinals saying, hey, man, I like the way you play, blah, 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 all this stuff. DeAndre Hopkins trade rumors. So a big landing spot to help Mac Jones because he needs all the help he can get. That'll be interesting to watch heading into the offseason. But Buffalo takes care of business, man. Again, emotional game for them, and they definitely showed up. And the plays that they made were indicative of that emotion running through their veins because I mean, how many kick returns for a touchdown have we even had for the entire NFL this year? For Nyheim Hines to do it twice in the same game, shit, dude, that is some higher power in effect. And I'm the least God person there is, but to me, if that's not something, bro, that's insanely coincidental.
Absolutely, it's a great story. Just keep things at a factual level. He's not home safe. He went to another hospital. They just transferred from that hospital that he was in before to one closer to home. But there's still some things that he has to kind of get back together. Like the normal things that normal people do, he hasn't been able to do. But he's able to talk, and those type of functioning are there. So, worst case scenario, you're looking at not running, but best case scenario, he can do all things, what's called daily things that you have to do, like showering, eating, cooking, talking to people. It looks like he can do all of that. So that's great. All right, next game up, Los Vikingos visited Los Ojos. Is that right? No, it's eyes. Also,
the eyes. Osos. Chicago eyes.
Los Grande Osos. So the Vikings visited the Bears. This game, this was the least excited I have been all year to watch a Vikings game. But it worked out pretty well. Vikings were favored by 8, and I was like, that's ballsy. But they took advantage of that. 29-13 was the final score. It was just a game that both the teams just left the game happy, right? What did the Bears didn't really want to win? This isn't a Lovie Smith Bears. They're not trying to win games right now. They're trying to lose games. So
the minute you start Nathan Peterman at quarterback, you've admitted that you're trying to openly lose the game.
Exactly. How many times has Nathan Peterman won a game?
Never. Has he ever?
I don't
Probably
know. It's
not.
a great question. So Vikings won, Bears lost, and Cook got injured. Madison came in and just did the exact same thing Cook would have done. Nothing crazy there, which is great to see because I really needed to see that in order to move into the playoffs with a injured starting running back. Cousins didn't have to come from behind for the first time. That was kind of nice. So didn't have to get help from his defense, which is also kind of nice. Threw for 1 touchdown, 17 for 20, which is pretty good. 225 yards. KJ Osborne, 5 for 6 for 117, which is nice. He's coming in at late in the season, kind of like making his name back. I was like, hey guys, remember me from last year? I was creating some deep plays too. So now he's doing just that. The last month or so, he's been very, very present in this offense. Jefferson's services weren't really needed this game. He went 4 for 5. Didn't really have to wear him down, which is great because I was really worried something might happen to him. Not so worried about Cook, obviously worried, but not as worried as I would be if something happened to Jefferson. So he only got 5 targets, which is not good for fantasy football, but who gives a shit at this point? Just need him healthy to go into the playoffs. And then Thielen just got his touchdown. He got a 4-yard touchdown catch. That's it for the Vikings receivers. Hawkinson didn't really use him either. He only got 1 target, 1 catch for 16 yards. And then on the other side, Peterman, no need to talk about him. Cole Kmet, 4 for 5 for 57 and a touchdown, ended his season on a pretty good note, probably jumped up a few points, so like tight end 5 or tight end 4 maybe. I don't know, something crazy like that probably. And then Herbie, similar stats to Madison. He also had 10 rushes for 50 yards, no touchdowns there. Also,
tight end 7.
Tight end 7. It's close. But Herbert's going to be really high on top of people's lists next year as far as like surprise running backs in case Montgomery goes somewhere. But as long as Montgomery's gone, if Montgomery's still there, then I don't see. I see a bunch of splitting happening.
Yeah, I think I looked this up actually the other day.
I think he's going to get reins. I remember seeing somewhere like, is this Montgomery last year?
Yeah, Montgomery's an undrafted free or unrestricted free agent. So
right.
yeah, okay. I mean he's 25. I mean, he's still not reaching that 27 clip, but they have somebody already that they can deploy in Herbert. So there's really no reason they're going to bring back Montgomery. So yeah, right. I mean, heading into 2023, it's definitely Herbert's backfield. Mm-hmm. And with Justin Fields, all of a sudden, Khalil Herbert looks like a potential top 10 pick. Like in that run offense. Damn.
Should be interesting. Yeah. All right, next up, we've got the Baltimore Ravens at Cincinnati to face the Bengals. Bengals were favored by 9 points, and they covered that spread. The final score was 27-16. The under hit, and with the win, Bengals win the division. Bengals, I thought they played hard, even though they really didn't need to. They were hard. They already clinched the playoff spot, but at times Burrow looked really well. He looked kind of shifty, like you'd mentioned, Sukar, and some of the last episodes. So that's really elevating his game a little bit. As far as the Ravens go, the Ravens run game, Dobbins didn't play. Kenyon Drake finished with 15.9 fantasy points, which included a touchdown. So nothing to take home from there. One thing that I really like from the Ravens side is Isaiah Likely, 21.3 fantasy points, 13 targets, 8 receptions, 103 yards. I understand that Mark Andrews is still in the game, but there have been talks from like starting preseason. I thought this guy looked really well. He's a rookie this year, and so I'm interested to see if they will continue to utilize him. We'll find out through preseason next year. But if they figure out how to add him to the mix, he could be a good target for whoever the quarterback is in Ravens land. The Bengals passing game, Chase had 22.6 fantasy points, 13 targets, 8 receptions, 1 touchdown. So, if you're in the fantasy playoffs with Jamar Chase in week 18, you've got to be happy with that.
That's me.
Yeah, there you go. Mixon gets a touchdown, 17.8 fantasy points. So good day for Mixon as well. Had some big runs as well. But the key to the victory for the Bengals was their defense. 2 picks thrown by Anthony Brown, who got the start for Huntley. And they also had 2 fumbles. 1 was returned for a touchdown in the end zone. So the Bengals, the Ravens, as well as their defense, I thought played at times. They just weren't able to overcome those turnovers, and they win the game, but they have a chance to redeem themselves next week. So we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. But it's going to be an uphill battle for sure with potentially no Lamar Jackson.
I can't believe they're in the playoffs. Like they haven't been with Lamar Jackson for like a month now. They snuck into the playoffs with this shitty ass pass defense. They're just, I don't know, man. Harbaugh things.
Yeah. I mean, Yeah, it is impressive, but if Anthony Brown is starting, they have no hope. And if Tyler Huntley starts, they have little to no hope. So it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, great season. You're right. For having a second and third string quarterback and losing basically the player that you basically cater your entire offense to and to still make the playoffs, that part is definitely impressive, no doubt.
Yeah.
Meaningless game, you might say, but no, this game really, really mattered for who was going to get the number 1 overall pick. The Houston Texans traveled to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. Texans were 2.5-point underdogs. Vegas even said they were not favored to win this game. So all signs were pointing to Houston losing and getting the number 1 pick. But what happens? They win the game 32-31, going for 2 on the last touchdown to get that extra point to win the meaningless game to officially lock in the number 2 seed or the number 2 pick. Indianapolis drops down and they actually now are the 4th overall pick. And the story of this matchup is the fact that the Texans won and they waited no time to fire Lovie Smith, like no time at all. And I mean, call me crazy, but to me, if the Houston Texans lost this football game, Lovie Smith is not fired as quickly as he is, because I don't think they don't have a contingency plan yet because they're still in rebuild mode. Like Lovie Smith knew that coming into this season, right? So their expectations when hiring him weren't, hey, you need to turn this franchise around with Davis Mills and Damian Pierce and Brandon Cooks. Like nobody was expecting that. So for them to fire him, the only thing that I can allude to is the fact that they wanted him to lose this game and they had the opportunity to lose despite winning the whole game. And in the final seconds, what's the biggest fuck you can do is go for 2 in a meaningless game to win the game and to not get the number 1 pick. So call me crazy, but I legitimately think that is a direct reason why they fired Lovie Smith. Brandon Cooks, the only guy that's really been highlightable on the Houston side, had 19.1 fantasy points. He finishes the year as wide receiver 49. He was hurt on and off, but the story for him is he wants to be traded to a contender. He wanted to be traded this year. They couldn't find a suitor. He's going to be reaching age 30, and he has an $18 million salary next year, 13 the year after that. But the bigger story is that's a $26 million cap hit and a $24 million cap hit in your age 30 and 31 season, and your name is Brandon Cooks. So what's the market going to be for a guy like that? That remains to be seen. But on the Colts side, the only guy that's worth highlighting, Zach Moss, came onto the scene, all of a sudden gets traded to this team and becomes a workhorse, gets 20 plus carries a game. He had 19.6 fantasy points. So if you started Zach Moss in week 18, he was probably the one guy that was a guy that came out of nowhere that ended up doing well for you in the end. But Houston wins this game. They lose out on the number 1 overall pick in a year when they absolutely need to draft a quarterback. But the good news is the team that surpasses them doesn't need to draft a quarterback, or at least we don't think. So either way, it could have still worked out for them. But do you guys have any thoughts on the Lovie Smith thing, or am I kind of blowing that out of proportion?
No, it's directly on proportion. That's exactly what happened. He didn't even get to go home. They were probably so pissed.
Yeah.
The owner's box was probably having a fit. There is one side of it that makes me kind of, you always have to look at both sides. And the one side is that they only have a couple days until they can start interviewing coaches, right? So maybe they were like, all right, sooner the better. Let's just get this show on the road. Maybe that was part of it, but I am very much immediately when I saw that text message, I was like, damn, I knew you fucked up, Lovey, but I didn't know you fucked up that bad.
Yeah. It's just, imagine a scenario where you get hired for a job and it's like, hey, this is from the ground up. Like we are at the lowest peak of our possible company's outline or projections, whatever. And we're basically building this up. So the expectation is never this person is going to come in and overnight turn this franchise around. So yeah, if they were so keen on hiring Lovie Smith, they knew what they were getting and they knew the situation they were putting him in. They were like, you're a veteran coach. So, you're not somebody that's, in his first year as an NFL head coach needing to prove something and going to try to get the most out of this horrible roster. You're just going to make sure that you don't shipwreck things and kind of do what we ask of you. And I think the ask of you was they came into a situation where they have the opportunity to get the number 1 pick. And Lovie Smith says, I'm not going to openly tank. So,
well, here's the thing though. I think that going for 2 shows that he is willing to either lose the game or win the game, right? It's not going to end in a tie. So he put the team out there to lose. If you look at it that way, and so
that's how you look at it. That's how you've been looking at it all year long.
The outcome was a win, and they they get it, but Lovie Smith just was never the answer in my opinion. That was the biggest surprise of all the coaches that got hired that last year, how did Lovie Smith manage to become a head coach? Like, I think he was just like a guy that was there as a placeholder, and then now they're going to move on and try to find someone else that's more long term. But the takes that you guys are making, I think, is much better than some of the crazy things I've seen. Like, it's not. I don't think it's a race thing, right? Like, it's not.
No.
Oh
Like,
God.
I definitely don't think it's that. Like, the Broncos head coach got fired too after 1 year. So, Lovie Smith was never the guy there. He should have never gotten that head coach job in the first place.
I think the problem is the scenario fits into the race narrative more, right? Hackett getting fired, coming into a scenario where you have basically a Hall of Fame quarterback that you just paid a shit ton of money to with a roster that already had a defense that was a quarterback away from winning, and you train wreck that team into not even making the playoffs. Totally understandable. But again, what was Lovie Smith expected to do? Like, to me now, this just reeks of lose-lose situation. Like, what the fuck was he going to do to not get himself fired? Like, I don't know. Like, and the problem is, I don't think it's a race thing, but the fact that it happens to be a black coach and gets the short end of a stick when he was like hired into a lose-lose scenario, it's kind of fucked up. But I don't think it's because he's black. I just think the coach was put in a fucked up situation and does not deserve to get fired whatsoever.
He was hired to improve that defense. That defense got worse. That's what happened, right? Like you said, it's not the answer. And it's a league of coaches that are young and smart and play good offense. Like, we're competing with like McVays and freaking like KOCs out here. It's like, you got to make plays, not this old head, like, let's run the ball and set up a good defense. And that's literally what happened. I'm not even looking at it from a race perspective. Like, you have a coach you bring in to maybe change the defense because it was so bad, didn't do that. And now you're going up against like all these future Hall of Fame type of coaches. It's not going to work. That era is over.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, even if you're coming on to fix the defense, your best player on the defense was a rookie cornerback that you drafted in the first round, right? So again, my answer is always going to be, what the fuck were the expectations of Lovie Smith? Like, you can't turn a defense around when you have nobody. Like, name somebody on that defense besides Derek Stingley Jr. Like, honestly, yeah, great. Like, there's nobody, right? So again, that's what gets me the most mad is you anybody that could have got hired in this situation. If the expectation was we're going to fire you at the end of the year, why the fuck are you taking that job? Like, it's just, I don't know. Again, despite all odds, I think it's hilarious that Houston wins this game going for 2 and gets the number 2 pick. And we'll see kind of how the draft shakes out for them. They get 2 top 15 draft picks again, and which is what they had last year too. So the rebuild continues to be there. So is the next coach that gets hired, the expectation is, hey man, you get 2 first-round picks, turn this franchise with Davis Mills around into a winning formula. If that guy doesn't have a winning season and he gets to keep his job at the end of next season, then it's like, what the fuck? But that is what it is. That's my rant over on that situation. Houston, again, man, give the Texans or fans a reason to want to come watch these games. And every time they have the opportunity to do so, it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, man. Like, the unfortunate, sad story here is that they really weren't the worst team in the league. There were some other teams that were worse.
Most recent 3-4 games, Houston was actually pretty fucking good. They competed against Dallas. They competed against Kansas City. They beat Tennessee. Yeah, and they beat Indianapolis by going for 2. So, talk to me about what have you done for me lately? They actually tremendously improved against 2 top-tier playoff teams. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Brian Flores all over again. But what do they have in common? Oh, shit, they're both black. So, again, it feeds into the stupid race narrative, which, again, I don't think that's the reason why, but it just feeds into the narrative.
Speaking of teams that just try to improve and still suck, we have the Jets going to visit the Dolphins, and Miami was favored by 3. They ended up getting that covered in a last-second miracle, which is, people should just know by now, like, stop lateraling in a chaotic fashion. Either have a plan to lateral, but don't just chaotically lateral. It just never works out. Ugly game, Dolphins made the playoffs. I've made some crazy allegations in the past. But this Dolphins team at this moment right now with this roster is going to get killed in the playoffs. Okay, they need Tua back ASAP. Like this experiment with this backup 3rd string Kyler Thompson and this whole Bridgewater thing. Like, it's not the answer. If they're going to do anything in the playoffs, they need Tua back, and that's just because they need to develop that chemistry that they once had. And now there's so much like things going on. Like, I haven't played with you in like 2 weeks. Then like 2 weeks ago before that, you weren't here for 3 more weeks. Like, at this point, the chemistry amongst the players is like, imagine AJ Brown getting Hurts back, right? Like, that must be a great feeling. Tyreek Hill has had that feeling taken away from him so many times, and now at this point, it's like, who is my quarterback? And like, what kind of routes do I run? Like, because what your quarterback likes the ball. Whether it's underthrown, you're ready for it. If it's overthrown, you're ready for it. Like, all your snap moves has to align with your quarterback's play, and that's kind of getting fucked up in Dolphins land. It's just all over the place right now. So they need Tua back. They need Tua back, at least so the chemistry that they once had can be there, because Skylar Thompson's not going to win you anything, especially against the Bills, who are coming up next. Flacco, just kind of, fill in Flacco. His son came to the game wearing a Dolphins jersey, and that's when you knew Flacco was going to lose this game. But yeah, it's just Flacco went 18 for 33 for 149 yards. That's worse than Madison's yards per rush this week, okay? As a quarterback, his yards per attempt was worse than a running back's yards per rush, and that running back didn't do that great. So it's just, again, I digress. Donovan, again, got the most carries. Zonovan got the most carries, but he only got 22 yards out of this double-digit carry, so he's not the answer. They need to – it's just – I think they were just like – yeah, it's Breece Hall. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around it, and there's going to be some backup who's going to vulture every now and then. But you don't need to look at any of these guys going into next year. Garrett Wilson, however, there's a trend here, right? If you have a reputable pocket presence kind of a quarterback, Garrett Wilson is the guy here. 17 targets, that's a lot of targets. 9 receptions out of those 17 targets, and just with a good pocket passer.
Half of Flacco's completions were to Garrett Wilson.
Yeah. I mean, that means he gets open, right? Like these new guys with the lengthy arms and the quickness in their feet, they just get open. Everybody's getting open nowadays, and I hope more people see that. Just need time for the receivers to get open, and you will get the pass. I mentioned one wide receiver that was available or that was present in most fantasy winning rosters. The other guy amongst those three is Waddle. He was actually number one. Waddle is the most prevalent player on winning rosters from a wide receiver standpoint. He was 5 for 5 for only 44 yards this game. Hill only 23 yards on 2 catches. Again, I can't stress this enough. Tua needs to get his ass back for this Dolphins team to be watchable at this point. And then Jeff Wilson and Mostert, they did really well. Probably part of the reason why they won this game, to be honest with you. 72 yards rushing for Wilson, 71 yards rushing for Mostert. They were pretty efficient, and they caught a couple passes here and there. Didn't do much with it, but that's all they had to work with, and they did pretty well against the Jets. In the grand scheme of things, against this really good Jets defense, they kind of mustered this one out. No pun intended. But at the end of it all, nothing to say about the Jets. They're just back to being a poverty franchise. With all that praise we gave them all year long and everything towards the end of the year, they just went back to their old ways.
Yeah, I mean they're a quarterback away, and what's crazy is they've just drafted a quarterback, and I mean they have a good defense. They just need a competent quarterback, and I think Mike White's proved he's better than Wilson. He can be in short spurts, but he's definitely not the answer. No. Obviously, Flacco's a million years old. I feel like at this point, Zach Wilson's just like mental side of things for the game of football has really deterred. So he's going to need to like go on some, Zen type retreat this offseason and get his head clear, because the confidence level is just not there anymore. And you look at where the Jets are going to draft, they're going to be drafting as the 13th overall pick this year. So the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks are already going to be gone. So
no, it's not. They're not going young here. They're going to get a veteran presence here. There's no way they're even allowed to get a young.
Lamar's there. I think Kyler has an opportunity to be moved with, obviously everything that's gone on in Arizona. So there are going to be Derek Carr. There's definitely quarterbacks on the market that can, for sure, you can plug and play and be obviously way better than Zach Wilson.
Yeah. I find it interesting that you mentioned that, half of Flacco's throws that he completed was to Garrett Wilson, but also half of his throws that he didn't even complete, like 33 attempts.
Yeah. And attempts were all it was either Wilson. It was every other play. The ball was thrown to Wilson, whether he caught it or not, didn't matter. Yeah. It's insane that's how open that guy's getting. He's warranting 17 targets, and that's definitely something.
Save Garrett Wilson. That's what needs to happen. All right, next up, we've got the Carolina Panthers at New Orleans to face the Saints. Carolina, the Saints were favored by 3.5 points. They do not cover that spread, as the final score was 10-7. Panthers end up winning this low-scoring affair under hits with 17 total points. But yeah, I was actually surprised that the Panthers even won, because how terrible they played pretty much throughout the whole game. But when it came down to the end, The Saints missed a 60-yard field goal. Panthers get the ball back and kick a field goal to win the game. But as far as fantasy implications, Olave gets a touchdown. Just like Garrett Wilson, Olave was targeted on 50% of his routes, so 12 receptions, but only 5 targets. So
Quarterback away.
Yeah.
Quarterback
You mean the
away.
opposite. 12 targets, only 5 receptions, you mean?
12 targets, only 5 receptions. Yes. Oh, yeah. A quarterback away, man. Free Chris Olave as well. Another rookie receiver that really needs a quarterback to help him out. Alvin Kamara finished the year strong, I guess. 107 yards on 23 carries
The
and
biggest
7
slap in the face.
Meaningless ass game. You put up 100 yards, 7 forced tackles when
Yeah.
the Panthers don't even give a shit.
Congrats.
Good job.
Congrats.
Yeah, so take that for what it is. Darnold, he didn't have a great game. 2 interceptions. Like I said, I'm just surprised that they won, but Darnold did get into the end zone to get a rushing touchdowns. Yeah, they tried to kick a 60-yard field goal to win the game. That didn't happen. Carolina, Darnold had like a huge run at the end, gets a first down, and puts it in field goal range, and they end up winning this game. But really no implications fantasy-wise, playoff-wise. Nothing to watch for in this game unless you're a Panthers and Saints fan. So the only thing I would point out is, yeah, Olave. He's the guy you need to target next year as well. Hopefully he gets a quarterback to give him those fantasy points that he truly deserves.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I didn't watch a snap of this football game. I'm not afraid to say that. It had no implications. Ugly ass, like, what am I watching? Darnold against Andy Dalton in a game where 2 teams are eliminated from the playoffs. That's disgusting football.
Yeah.
But don't quote me on this in like 5 weeks when the NFL's over. And I'm like, God, I would give anything to just watch Darnold against Andy Dalton once more time. But I don't know. We'll see.
Said no.
Browns and Steelers, we had our eyes glued to this game, Shovit, because the Steelers had an opportunity to make the playoffs. They needed a win. They needed a Miami Dolphins loss, and they needed a Patriots loss. Steelers took care of business. They did their job. They were covered by 2.5, or they were 2.5 point favorites. They covered that spread. They win the game 28-14. The Browns lose. They have no first round pick. They're going to be drafting 12th overall, but that goes to Houston for the Deshaun Watson trade. So Houston has the 2nd and the 12th pick. And the Steelers, they're going to miss the playoffs, but Mike Tomlin adds to that streak another year of 500 or better football. He is undefeated when it comes to that stat in his head coaching tenure with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, this game really ultimately from a fantasy perspective, and I mean, I'm just kind of looking forward to 2023. Deshaun Watson, he started to pick up his play. He's obviously drastically improving from week to week because he's been away from football for almost 2 years. So 2023, I expect Watson's outlook to be great. I think he's probably going to be projected a top 5 to 7 fantasy football quarterback. So he's got the weapons. Nick Chubb's going to be there next year. Kareem Hunt is a free agent. He's an unrestricted free agent, so he'll probably be gone. But Amari Cooper and Njoku, those guys are all back as well. So Watson should have the full force to have a good fantasy season next year. For the Steelers, Kenny Pickett, is he the starting quarterback next year? I mean, I think he is, but I also don't know. Nothing has been solidified from that position, in my opinion, based on his play to determine that heading into next year, you're like, Kenny Pickett's the guy. Najee Harris, nice to see the late season resurgence after struggling early on. But again, Najee's success went hand in hand with the Pittsburgh Steelers' success, right? When the Steelers were struggling, Najee sucked. When they won 6 games in a row, Najee, I think, in that span was a top 10 running back in fantasy football. So the opportunities for Najee are there. His talent is there. I think, he just needs to run the ball straight and not side to side. And a lot of the other stuff will take care of themselves. And on the receiving side, man, Pickens, I was definitely wrong about George Pickens. Now, surface level, box score watchers will be like, why? Because Pickens didn't have that great a season. But if you watch George Pickens, there are very few guys that I trust throwing 50-50 balls to than George Pickens. And he doesn't even get many targets. It's not like he's gotten enough opportunities to where he's a lock, but there's something about that guy, man. He just makes plays. I think they need to make an emphasis that all of the targets that Deontay Johnson gets, and I get that Deontay Johnson's probably a better route runner, so he's getting open, but I trust you to throw 50-50 balls to Pickens, almost half of those targets that Deontay Johnson gets when he's wide open running a route. So I'm hoping they see a shift in that for Pickens because the future is bright for him in 2023. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, again, they gritted, they grinded, they won, 6 straight to end the season, and they had an opportunity to make the playoffs, but the fucking Jets could not beat the Dolphins and Skylar Thompson. So again, sucks to not make the playoffs, but all things considered, where we were sitting 7 weeks ago, you're probably chalking this up as a successful season, Joe.
Yeah, it's weird because like I was heavily invested in the Steelers winning because I had a bet that they were gonna have a winning record end of season. So that's all done. I won that, but now it's like we're like in this weird position where like I don't see us making a lot of changes. I don't see the Steelers making a lot of changes because they did get that over 500 record. So it's you're really gonna have to see more from Kenny Pickett next year. I don't think he's a fantasy starter, but he's definitely the starter for the Steelers. And then it's not, and the way Tomlin makes it sound like, looks like the offensive coordinator Matt Canada isn't going anywhere either. So it's gonna be a similar Steelers offense, but better, hopefully, just because of experience. So I'm a little bit, that's just the way it is, and it's gonna be interesting to see if they make those big changes. But hopefully I'm wrong, and the Steelers actually look a lot better than they did this year, because that beginning half of the year, man, it was terrible to watch. And Kenny Pickett wasn't there. It was Mason Rudolph. So, or not Mason Rudolph, Trubisky. So, I mean, that makes sense too.
Yeah.
I like how you have a little tooth picking thingy in your hand while talking about Pickens and Pickett, Sweegar.
Oh, this? Oh, wow. I didn't even realize I had that. What the hell? How did you even see that? Was I holding it up on
You
cam
were just like showing it everywhere as if you're like freaking
Oh, wow.
sponsoring it.
What the fuck?
But yeah, I love Pickens, man. Pickens, but I also understand why he's not getting the targets. And Sweegar, you kind of touched on it. It's the route running, right? Like, do you take the guaranteed 5 yards in front of you from Deontay Johnson, or do you hope that it doesn't get picked off, right? So that's why the targets are limited to like 5 to 7, because those prayers can happen randomly, those 5 to 7. And he's going to come down with most of them. Hopefully he can run more routes. It's a DK Metcalf situation, and we see how DK Metcalf, in the same situation, played this exact same way, just had Russell Wilson throwing the ball, not Kenny Pickett. So things were a little different back then. But the stars are very, very bright for Pickens. Chargers at the Broncos. We would have probably been thinking this was a playoff matchup, week 18. They probably set it up that way, all sexy with their all Russells and all their cool people. But no, this was probably the most useless game of the day. Like, nothing mattered. Totally meaningless for both teams. And the Broncos finally get a good win. That's poetic. If I've ever, if the Broncos season in a nutshell. They finally do well, but it's just the most useless thing on earth. So the Chargers get to face the Jaguars because of that. And a couple of spotlights. I'm not going to get too invested into this game, but Jerry Jeudy had a pretty Jerry Jeudy-like game that we hoped Jerry Jeudy would be like, right? 5 for 6 for 154 yards. That's like 30 yards a catch. That was pretty impressive there. Joey Bosa had only 8 pass rush attempts. They kind of just threw him in there because he just came back from like really, really long time in the IR. And he only had 8 plays where he was rushing. And in those 8 plays, he had 1 sack and 4 pressures, right? So they're so happy to get him back. The defense is a whole different defense with him back. He's the other brother, right? Nick Bosa's older brother before Nick Bosa was Nick Bosa, probably learned from Joey Bosa. So good to have him back in Chargers defensive line there. Chargers only allowed 3 pressures on 45 pass blocking snaps. That's very un-Chargers-like, and that's nice to see towards the end of the season, right before the playoffs. And it is against a pretty good Broncos team too. So hopefully there's some signs of life there. And they're also getting their star right tackle or left tackle. I forget who it is, but they're getting him back. He's not playing in the first playoff game, but if they make it to the next playoff game, he comes back. So that's also huge. They just have to get to the next level and their line gets stronger. Russell Wilson scored 3 touchdowns, 24 fantasy points. Congrats to nobody. Herbie, 273 yards, 2 touchdowns, like 16, 15 fantasy points, whatever. That's where he's been hiding all year long. Eckler, 11 rushes for 34 yards and 4 catches for 36 yards. That was like, lower end of his point scoring for the whole year. That's probably one of his worst games. And that's like Chris Godwin's like best game for the first like 16 weeks of the season. I would be happy if Chris Godwin got me this amount of points, right, at that time. And then nothing else to talk about as far as touchdowns. A bunch of randos like Sutton, who's now a rando, and then this guy named Batty and Tomlinson. So just nothing to gain from that knowledge. And then Keenan Allen going out with a bang, could be his final regular season game ever. You never know. 8 catches on 11 targets for 102 yards and 2 tutties. 33 fantasy points for the old man.
Was that the most fantasy points this week?
33?
Seems like a lot. Because a lot of like starters didn't really play and stuff. Let me just check. I'm actually curious.
That could be.
Yeah, I think there's a lesson to be learned from this season, and it's that you don't go paying for quarterbacks that are aging like a lot of
Yeah.
money. Like,
Yeah.
the Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, both of these. Aaron Rodgers didn't have a single fantasy point with like single game with more than 20 fantasy points this year. So it's ridiculous.
Keenan Allen. It was Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen was the number one fantasy football player in week 18, but on half point PPR, he had 26.2, but he was the number one player.
Wow.
And number two was Russell Wilson. We just talked about him. So what a fucking weird universe we live in.
Right.
Week 18 fantasy. All right, next up, we've got the New York Giants traveling to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. The Eagles were favored by 14 points, and they do not cover that spread as the final score was 22-16, and the under was set to 43 points. And the Eagles, they secured the number one spot in the NFC East. The Cowboys were playing at the same time that the Eagles were playing, so they were, I'm sure they were trying to figure out if the Eagles were going to lose or not, and that clearly didn't happen. AJ Brown set a single season record for receiving yards by the game that he had this week. So kudos to him. He's probably one of those guys that if you have him in your fantasy lineups, you probably got pretty far this year as far as playoffs and all that is concerned.
Wide receiver 5 on the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's very, very impressive. I didn't see that coming. I thought that Eagles were going to continue to run the run offense, but if you didn't think that and you drafted them, kudos to you. I think that this is a different team when Hurts is playing, and they showed it. They went out and they won, beat the Giants. Although the Giants were really not even playing anyone. Daniel Jones wasn't there. Saquon Barkley wasn't there. Kenny Golladay was there. He gets a touchdown. Surprisingly, he was 72 touchdowns away from his bonus touchdown, or like 70.
Yeah.
I don't know, 72 touchdowns. That's a lot of touchdowns.
Catches.
72 catches away from his bonus.
72
touchdowns. Wow, that bonus must be really good though.
Billion.
If you make the Hall of Fame, we give you $500K. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
That's chump change for these guys. Anyways, I thought the only big fantasy implications as far as this game is I think it's Zach Elliott there. Jake Elliott, their kicker, had 2 50-yard field goals, complemented by some extra points as well. So he probably had the best day. Davis Webb gets a rushing touchdown, but you probably didn't start him either. But all in all, I think the Eagles are just a lot better team with Hurts on the Hurts there. Their front five is actually really good too. They didn't allow a sack or a hit and gave up just 5 pressures on 41 pass blocking snaps. So I think PFF has them as the best O-line in the NFL right now. So hopefully, this continues into the playoffs for Eagles, and with that stat, I expect them to go pretty far.
The San Francisco 49ers were hosting the Arizona Cardinals, trying to lock up the number 2 seed. Cardinals really not playing for much. They were 14.5-point underdogs, and the 49ers covered the spread. 38-13 final. They win this game. Arizona says, enough of you, Cliff Kingsbury, and they fire him, and they have the 3rd overall draft pick heading into 2023. San Francisco, like I mentioned, they take the 2 seed, and they're going to play a home game against the division rivals, Seattle Seahawks, in the first round of the playoffs. I mean, dude, the San Francisco 49ers are just scary. Fantasy-wise, it's scary as a fantasy owner because there's so many mouths to feed heading into next season even. But, I mean, CMC played a little bit, got into the end zone. Elijah Mitchell came back from the IR, scored twice. Debo's back, and they didn't even have to use him because they didn't have a ton to play for. Ayuk had a great, great year. And Kittle, after Purdy's been quarterback, is looking like, tight end 1. He's been the best tight end in football since Brock Purdy's been the quarterback of the 49ers. So, that's a scary bunch to have to face in the playoffs. So, I mean, again, everything looks great for them. Their defense, I will say, has looked at times a little bit lackluster. They gave up a lot of points to Stidham and the Raiders. So, I mean, again, I take that with a grain of salt, but as long as Nick Bosa's on the field and generating pressure, he makes that defense a lot better as well. And then the story on the Arizona side, I already talked about it. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury's fired. DeAndre Hopkins, they came out and said they're going to look to try to trade him. So if they are in a full tilt rebuild, are they wanting to rebuild with Kyler Murray, or they can still unload Kyler Murray, and with the 3rd overall pick, they can draft a quarterback. So it's going to be a lot cheaper on a rookie contract. It's a true rebuild. You're going to get a brand new coach. And again, if all the rumors and everything around Kyler Murray are true, this is the best opportunity to get out of his, get out of contract with him, a guy that, maybe doesn't have the work ethic that you expect. Otherwise, why else would he have those stipulations in his contract? So it's a murky situation, but they have an out here. If they wanted to trade him, he's got tremendous value, and they're drafting high enough that they can draft a quarterback. So for them, the future is at least in rebuild phase. For the 49ers, I mean, they go into the playoffs in full tilt. And I mean, I'm as terrified of the 49ers as I am any other football team in the NFL.
Yeah, man. I would put them right. There's only 4 teams in the playoffs in my eyes. It's the Bills, the Chiefs, the 49ers, and the Eagles. Everybody else has proven and shown signs of weakness in one way or another. And the Bills have too in a little way, but they got this whole magical thing going for them right now. So I don't know. But these other 3 teams, man, God bless whoever has to face them, because it's going to be a nightmare trying to scheme up against like some of these juggernauts. The 49ers team is just
they're terrifying.
So complete. They're just like perfect.
I just named off like 7 players, and they're all stars. Like they're all above average football players or borderline stars, and they all play for the same offense, So it's just, they can beat you every which way. And on top of that, their defense is phenomenal. So they are as complete a team in the NFL.
I mean, the NFL needs Eagles, 49ers, like NFC Championship game, right? Like
Eagles, 49ers, Bills, Chiefs. I think that would be like the script made in heaven for the NFL.
Well,
it's gotta be.
There's Bengals.
Yeah, the Bengals are the only wild card. That's the one team that I'm like, don't rule them out. But you're spot on. Those first 2 seeds, they seem like top tier echelon, and everybody else is kind of just
the Ravens scare you? No. Do the Jaguars scare you? No.
Chargers don't scare me.
Chargers, Dolphins. That AFC's done. It's done. Yeah. There's just 2 teams there. NFC, you got the Vikings, like the biggest choke artist, literally the biggest choke artist in football history. And then you have a bunch of people that shouldn't even make the playoffs. There's Cowboys, who are the second biggest choke artist in NFL history. And then you have Tom Brady, who's just sliding into the playoffs, just barely, there's just for the sake of the NFL, like we need this to happen.
It's top heavy. And I think even as Vikings fans with the Vikings in the playoffs, I think our expectations are so limited that as a spectator and an enjoyer of football, a San Francisco Philly semifinal and like a Bills Chiefs semifinal would be amazing football to watch and witness.
I've never been this like humbled by a Vikings team that's so good on paper.
13 wins. They've only won 13 times in their franchise history, 2 other times, bro. And we're going into the playoffs with like no expectation.
This was the second highest yards through the air the Vikings have ever had in their whole existence. This is next to Randy Moss and Dante Culpepper and Chris Carter. We're number 2 this year right here.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, this is the first year for the coach, and the fact that you guys already have like what you didn't get last year with your old coach, like that's something to kind of be excited about.
If only you could like trade those in for some playoff wins, that'd be wonderful. But yeah, expectations are little to none. Like they don't even exist. Okay. Did I already finish this game, or was I just blabbing on for no reason? I was blabbing on for no reason. I haven't even started this game. All right, so the Rams went to go visit the Seahawks, and that was actually a good, exciting game from a rushing standpoint. If you're a fan of them running backs, you love this game. Seahawks try to give this game away multiple times, but at the end of the day, the Rams was like, nah, man, we ain't about to Lovie Smith this shit. We don't have any picks, but we're still going to lose this game. Seahawks pulled it off in overtime, 19-16. Ramsey had a classic Ramsey day with 2 picks and only 3 catches allowed for 33 yards. Huge factor, probably why they ended up winning this game. Geno Smith had a really quiet, really bad, but still ended up with 15 points, right? Like some of the best days Herbert's had has been around 15 points this year. So like for Geno Smith to have a really bad day and give me 15 points from a fantasy perspective, respect, Geno, respect. Good running day, like I mentioned. Akers went 21 rushes for 104 yards. Welcome back, Akers. Welcome back.
He's a stud. He's actually a good running back.
Dude,
he's actually a good running back.
He literally got me to the finals. Like literally, like 3 straight weeks of good points. And I was running with Pacheco and just randos for a whole year. And at the last glimmer of hope, right before the playoffs, I'm like, Akers just pops out of nowhere. And beautiful, magical. Thank you for second place, I guess. Akers, 21 for 104, 3 catches and 3 receptions. 3 catches on 3 targets for 24 yards, which is nice. Nice little boost there. And then Walker, man. Walker's getting into that territory where next year, if you're not getting him in the first round, you're fucking up. 29 carries. I can give you like 2 other running backs in the NFL that get that. Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs. Who else gets you 29 carries a game? Nobody. And now Walker does. So 114 yards and 1 catch for 10 yards. If I can get that on a daily basis for my running back, gladly draft him with my eyes closed because the floor is what? The floor is like 15 points at that point. Whatever. That's enough of walkering. Lockett, on the other hand, I'm never going to draft him. So you guys can enjoy him and I'll be happy for you, like by proxy. But 4 catches on 7 targets for 54 yards and a touchdown. All he did was score touchdowns all year, and he finished the year with 1 more touchdown.
He's a beast, man. Again, he just goes so unappreciated, under the radar. And I'm like you. Why is it that there's like a group of players that I'm like, they're going to continue to have good years and prospective years, but I'm never personally going to draft that player on my team. And those guys continually like kick me in the ass. They end up having great years, and I'm like, I could have drafted them, but I didn't.
It's not that you're not drafting them because they suck. You're drafting them because something about them gives you a red flag. You're like, something about this guy, I can't put my finger on it. But then, I can kind of put my finger on Lockett. I'm like, he's tiny. Like, he can get hurt at any moment. His injury history is terrible. And he's banking off of this touchdown streak, which theoretically, if you get all the data in NFL history, like, you cannot sustain this many days of touchdowns in a row, right? So, like, that kind of, I'm like, it's not going to happen again, is it? It's not going to happen again, is it? And it just keeps happening. So, right? Like, it's things like that. Versus A.J. Brown, you get like 15 targets a game. So you're like, all right, I will blindly get that on my team. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, at the beginning of the season, it was Geno Smith, and that was like the Seahawks were the biggest fade if you were drafting. Like, you didn't think, outside of Rashad Penny, like, no one. Kenneth Walker was probably someone you got from the waivers.
He got drafted. I think he was drafted late.
He was drafted, but late. Yeah,
he was drafted, but Rashad Penny did really well. Some people may have even dropped him and then picked him up later. But yeah, I think he had a stellar year. My only concern with Walker was that there were times that like he would have touchdowns, but then like 50 yards. And so I was like, maybe he's just not breaking away. But I think that he's one of those guys as well. If he was on your fantasy team, you probably did really well. All right, moving forward to the Dallas Cowboys at Washington to face the Commanders. Dallas was favored by 7 points. They do not cover that spread. And the under hits with the final score of 26-6. And man, you talking about Cowboys shit in the bed. They definitely shit the bed. It was ridiculous. Muffed punt by the kicker, Anger, who just failed to catch the ball. Turpin has a fumble, has a turnover as well on a punt return. Prescott had a pick 6. So I don't even think it's the Commanders defense playing really well either. It's just the Cowboys shit in the bed. And I got to wonder, if you're a Cowboys fan, like you've got to think that this team could win the Super Bowl just because you're a Cowboys fan and, with the record. And now you see them losing against the Commanders. Like, I wonder what some of these Cowboys fans are feeling. And it's going to be interesting to see how the playoffs play out, because I think a lot of hearts are going to be broken here.
If you're not scared as a Cowboys fan, then you're just bad at football. Like, you don't understand this game. Like, if you're thinking with the same energy you had like a month ago when they were just demolishing people left and right, like, it's not true. This Cowboys team definitely has glaring holes in random places. Like, they don't have that like juggernaut effect that the Eagles and the 49ers and the Bills, even with the record, people aren't really afraid of them. Let's be honest. That whole being on Monday night or Sunday night, whatever that was, against the Vikings and destroying us kind of, made the general average fan be like, oh my God, the Cowboys are good. But we've seen what's happened since then, and that the average fan hasn't seen. And there's a lot of mistakes, especially from the wide receivers. Like, I think at least 5 of those Prescott interceptions are like strictly on the wide receivers. And then Prescott has this game to kind of like make up for all that. Like, hey, naysayers, look at this. I'm going to destroy his Commanders team. Shit's the bed, right? So it's like, which Cowboys team are we going to get in the playoffs?
Yeah. I mean, I think the Cowboys are in a good spot next week because I don't really believe that this Tom Brady narrative that in the playoffs he's going to be some different guy that we haven't seen already in the 17 weeks already. So I still think that they have a chance to win this game, and that's probably going to bring some momentum back up. But we'll see how that plays out. Last thing I want to know on the Commanders is I thought that Jahan Dotson, he played pretty well, 4 targets for 72 yards. Another rookie receiver that you need to keep your eye on, as Sam Howell, who got the start. And I didn't think he was that bad. 11 for 19, 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, but 35 yards rushing. To be able to come in and play the Cowboys and defeat them, I know it was a defense mainly and just Cowboys just fucking up, but I think that he warrants a start next year over Wentz, over Heineke. There's something to see with this guy. So hopefully, they get that figured out and they get the quarterback situation figured out. But Commanders, they win, but they're still out of the playoffs. They'll probably regroup in the preseason, and Cowboys next week against the Buccaneers. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that was we had to watch this game, right? Because we were all watching at your place, and there's a bunch of Cowboys fans. That was one of the hardest watches of football. Like they couldn't complete passes. Like they went like spurts of just Dak not completing a pass. Like he was 10 for 30. Like it was one of the worst games I've ever seen. And like you said, the Commanders were playing for nothing. They started a rookie quarterback who had never played in the NFL. And for them to put up this kind of performance heading into the playoffs, yeah, Tampa Bay is, it's not the same team. It's not the same Tom Brady, if you want to, put it that way. But, I trust Tom Brady in the playoffs, and I trust the Cowboys to shoot themselves in the foot, because that's just kind of what history tells us. So, I don't know, man. If the pass, like you said, was that you and I talking each other where we're like, I haven't noticed Micah Parsons on any play. Like he didn't make a single play.
Yeah.
Like they didn't even mention his name. I don't even remember his name being mentioned in the game. So like if the pass rush disappears for Dallas, all of a sudden they have nothing. They have nothing else because the corners can't cover. If the pass rush isn't there, the offense at times can disappear, literally disappear. So, I mean, yeah, if you're a Cowboys fan, yeah, unless you're just a homer, you're probably channeling the same mindset as us Vikings fans are, where it's like, yeah, we're in the playoffs, but like, what are we really expecting to happen? Yeah.
It's the same team, man. Just replace all those words with our players' names. It's all the same story. When the pass rush isn't there, the defense can't do shit. The quarterback's throwing this and this. Like it's the same story. It's the same team. It's just so funny how it's like this parallel world of like our nemesis that we just grew up around. And like, I had no reason to hate the Cowboys. I was just forced to hate them because of just being this one person around like 500 people that love the Cowboys, and they get like picked on for being different, having a Vikings mindset. So like I've developed this like defense mechanism against Cowboys fans. But it's just so funny like how just all of this plays out. It's just like parallel world where they're the exact same team as we are. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's like our own karmic like way of being like, oh, this is your favorite team. You grew up here. Well, your least favorite team is just as identical to you as your favorite team. It's just weird ass shit. All right, let's end the rundown with Sunday Night Football, the matchup that everybody was waiting for. If only Seattle could have lost, but they didn't. So Sunday Night Football, the Lions traveled to Lambeau Field to take on the Packers, merely playing spoilers where the Packers needed to win and they were going to lock up that 7th seed. The Lions eliminated because Seattle won, only playing for bragging rights and heading into 2023. The Lions getting no respect, 4.5-point underdogs. They didn't need the points. They won the game outright, 20-16. The Lions finish above 500 and eliminate Green Bay from playoff contention. Not to mention the Lions are going to be drafting 6th overall and 18th overall. So 2 first-round picks for a team that's already heading in the right direction. The future is bright for Detroit and Dan Campbell. Green Bay, not so much. They're drafting 15th overall with their entire future in flux because who the hell knows what Aaron Rodgers is going to do? That guy is as, as aloof, if that's the right word, where like, I have no idea what the hell he's going to do this offseason. He, did you guys see the interaction with Jameson Williams where he asked for his jersey and he's like, I'm going to hold on to this one. And, he's such a, Rodgers to me is such a narrative and shit creator, like instigator, that could have literally meant nothing. He probably has like full force the intention to play next season, but on the off chance that something happens this offseason where he's like, I get an opportunity and I don't have to play, I want to make sure that I cherish this. So I think he's just leaving everything in the open or, all the cards on the table. But do you guys really think Aaron Rodgers is done playing football?
No, I don't think so.
I think he should be. I don't
think he should be either.
I don't think he played really well this year. I think that
played with rookie wide receivers and Robert Tonyan throwing the ball to him. Getting the ball thrown to him. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into this, but he's still the best quarterback I have ever seen in my life. So it's hard to like just automatically just call him shit. You know what I mean? Like it's hard because I didn't see like pick sixes thrown badly. I didn't see like I still saw very much the same Rodgers. I just saw a lot of Romeo Doubs drops and a lot of Christian Watson drops that could have changed everything. You know what I mean? Like it's just hard to judge his play this year with this like totally random team. But I think towards the end we saw what it could be. Like they started winning almost every game and they almost won this game. So I don't think he's done playing football, but he does love being the bad man, right? Like he loves that narrative. He just probably jerks off to himself in front of a mirror when he gets home. Like he's that guy. He is literally like, he just loves the hate. He is the bad man. And like, and now he's just playing on that role. And now he knows he has content for his podcast every Tuesday with, what's his name? The punter from the Colts.
McAfee.
Right. So like he's a smart guy. He's also really good at football, but he understands this is towards the end of his career. He's not going to just play just to play. Kind of like what LeBron's been saying lately. Like, like random games aren't it. If he's going to play, he's going to be playing with, Devonta Adams in Raiders land probably, and probably going to force them to sign Hopkins. Like that's the kind of shit I see happening if Rodgers is going to play, but I don't see him like going to the Titans and trying to like revive some random team. But it's hard to say that he's done playing football, and it's also hard to say that he should be done playing football.
Yeah, I just don't think that the Packers are going to give them the help that they need because like their
They
defense
won't. They never have. They never will. What?
Right.
They're like 20 years to do, and they haven't. So obviously, history tells us they're probably not going to.
Right. So for that reason, I mean, he's just going to be playing, like you said, LeBron James is going to be playing to play. And so if they need to focus on something, they definitely need to focus on their defense. Now, if they can get Hopkins, that changes things up a little bit. But if they can't get that receiver, they've got to expect the Watson and Dobbs of their team to really step up. And does Aaron Rodgers really want to go through that? And that's why I'm saying, he should probably just call it quits just for the sake of why? What's the purpose?
Yeah. I mean, he definitely still has something left to prove. Talent-wise, we've talked about it. He's one of the best of all time. But again, he only in all of the years that the Packers, continue to win 13 games, every single year they win the division, basically, right? Every single year they're in the playoffs. His playoff track record is not to the caliber of, the talent that he puts on the field. Like we agree that he's more talented than Tom Brady, but in the playoffs, Tom Brady always wins, and Aaron Rodgers has only won one time.
Right.
Every other time he's choked.
Just remove Tom Brady from this conversation because he's an anomaly. He's a GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. Remove him from this conversation. Now we're talking with like people that are just like Aaron Rodgers. Now we're comparing to like Drew Brees, just one title, right? Like the conversation becomes really, really more clear cut when you remove Tom Brady from it because we're so used to just comparing everything to Tom Brady. And at this point, it's very unfair to like compare a lot of these players to him or like, it just because it's so unattainable. It's just he's like a god now. He's like solidified himself as literally the god that no one will ever touch. No matter how great Mahomes is, I don't see him getting 7 championships. So if we take away the Tom Brady aspect and just look at Rodgers compared to everybody else around him, he's still superior to all those other guys, even though they have like maybe one more Super Bowl than them. You know what I mean? So it's like it gets murky. It gets really murky. This whole conversation gets really murky because it's so hard to win a Super Bowl, first of all, versus like the NBA where you can win every year because you have all these players. So it's like it's difficult. Playoffs is a whole different animal. That's why we love this so much, is because it's so exciting. It's so rare when things happen because it doesn't happen very often. There's really, really rare repeats. But then when you bring the Patriots into the conversation, then everything gets skewed because now we're comparing everything to what the Patriots have done, and it's just not possible.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Even if we remove Tom Brady from the equation, right? Let's remove Tom Brady from the equation. Inferior quarterbacks have won Super Bowls more. Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger, even Matthew Stafford, a guy that before this past year we would have deemed as a mediocre, average at best, maybe above average arm talent. He won a Super Bowl, right?
Eli Manning.
Eli Manning won too, and I get that it's a team sport. But you're consistently in the playoffs every year. So you're giving your team better opportunities than 22 other teams that don't make the playoffs, right? And has Rodgers had a year where he's been fully healthy and the team hasn't made the playoffs? I can't really think of a year. It's probably an anomaly. So, and again, we look at this guy as one of the best, if not the most talented quarterback of all time. I just think he needs more to his resume. And this was something so small, but they could have just won this game at home against the Detroit Lions and made the playoffs. And Rodgers had a terrible game. He did not play well. And so this was a small stepping stone just to make the playoffs. And in a must-win situation, they're going to rely on the best player on the team, which is Aaron Rodgers. And again, they didn't get it done. So I don't know. The defense only held the Lions, who were the third best offense in the league, to 20 points. Rodgers had the opportunity to win this football game for this team, and he didn't do it at home.
Agreed.
At home.
Absolutely agree. He should have won this.
But we'll see. Yeah, I don't think football is over for Aaron Rodgers, but I think he's going to be very, very selective whether he stays with Green Bay if they don't get any more help. Like he's not going to spend a whole offseason or a whole year and a half getting chemistry with rookie receivers, right? He probably wants to go to a better situation. So yeah, the Raiders make a lot of sense, but Rodgers is the evil villain. He's the narrative feeder. So how bad is it going to look on him that he knew that his best friend was going to leave the team and he was okay with it, and now he's chasing after his best friend because he realizes.
Isn't it crazy how the whole thing played out?
Yeah,
pretty wild.
He's realizing that without his best friend, oh wait, this quarterback that we think is the most talented quarterback, arguably of all time, is all of a sudden looks kind of human. So I don't know. It's we've lived with Aaron Rodgers in our division for almost 20 years. So like we witnessed such greatness, and he's so good that we can't hate him because of the respect he, demands. Right. And so with that respect also comes, in a must-win game at home against the Detroit Lions, who've been your, little brothers for 2 decades. Surely you can come away victorious, but to put up 16 points, throw 1 touchdown, 1 interception, again, Rodgers, if you go back to his game logs, and the only reason I know this is I continue to believe in Rodgers and bet on him every week to throw more than 1.5 touchdown passes. There are more games this year where he's thrown less than 2 touchdown passes than any other season in his career, right?
Yeah,
so
the game script is just not in his favor either. They run the ball so fucking much this year. I don't know why they do that. Maybe because the receivers suck and they had to change something up early on, and then they established this running team. They're like one of the most running teams in the league with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So it doesn't make much sense. Like, I agree with you, dude. This whole season has been this like experiment to see what would happen, and then it kind of ticked like halfway through it, and they kind of ran with it, but a little too late.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, again, it's going to make for a great offseason. There's a lot of big name quarterbacks that are, for sure on the move, in flux, more than likely going to get moved. So it'll make for a monumental shift in the NFL heading into 2023, in my opinion. That's it for the rundown, guys. A week where a lot of games didn't matter. And for us, it's still, an hour and 20 minutes in, and we can never stop talking because that's how much we love football. Let's end the episode giving out our end of the year fantasy football awards. You know what? Let's change it up. I always start things off. Shasho, you start us off with your first award to end the season.
So this is the Herbert C. Hoover Award. Can you guys take a guess who this would be?
So Herbert obviously makes me think it's Justin Herbert or Khalil Herbert. But
you know me. You know me.
Yeah, but there's a reason you added C. Hoover. Like, what you put Herbert C. Hoover. Like, you put the whole name, you put the middle initial. So I'm like, there's got to be more to it than that. And after I get to that train of thought, I have no answers for you. So I honestly have no fucking idea.
Yeah, I am also drawing a blank. I mean, he's a president.
Yeah, something president.
Damn, you guys are good. It's not that deep, but it's kind of deep in a different way. But you guys are good at this. You're getting better. Okay, I'll just tell you since it looks like we're at a standstill. Okay, so what is that name? What do you get out of that name? So you went with the Herbert part, but you didn't go with the Hoover part.
Dam. He's a dam.
No. What else? What else does
Hoover? I don't know.
It's like the third leading brand in this household appliance.
Hoover? I honestly don't know. I do not.
Vacuum cleaner.
There's a Hoover vacuum?
Am I tripping right now? Did I just do all this for nothing?
No, you're right. There is Hoover vacuum
cleaner. Yeah, there's Hoover. It should be third leading after Dyson and Shark. It should be Hoover.
Shark. Okay, so the third leading.
Why
no, it's not. That was just part of it. That's not why. It's just Hoover. So Hoover is a vacuum cleaner, and what do vacuum cleaners do?
They suck shit up.
They suck. They suck. So the Herbert C. Hoover Award goes to 4 players, and I'll just let you guys pick who gets this trophy. Okay, Russell Wilson, Kyle Pitts, Alvin Kamara, or Deontay Johnson. Pick.
Got it.
I mean, honestly, it can't be Pitts. Pitts got hurt. Even though he's underwhelming, I don't think it's Pitts. I don't think it's Kamara. At this point, I'm like, Deontay Johnson is kind of who he is. So like my personal expectations of him are not very high. So that doesn't disappoint me. To me, Russell Wilson is the most deserving with how much money he got paid. He didn't drop off last year. He got hurt. He was still playing at the same level. And then all of a sudden you see him be like the shittiest quarterback in the NFL. Like that Absolutely. To me is the epitome of it.
To me, it's Kamara because where he got drafted is probably top 10, and the production that you got was nowhere near top 10 results. And so Russell Wilson is probably like an 8th round, 9th round guy that you get, maybe even later. And so it's okay if Russell Wilson doesn't mess up, doesn't produce. But if Kamara doesn't produce and you draft him where you did, then you're kind of
you get 9th place. Yeah, no, you guys that's really good explanations for both of them. Kamara was 18th in running backs this year, so did not expect that, right? Yeah. All right, Shove It up next, or is Sweetcar going to go next?
No, Shove It, you go.
Okay, so my award name is going to be the Fantasy Guru Award.
It goes to me. Just kidding. I don't know. Fantasy guru
Yeah,
Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler.
it's that's a good one, but it's not Austin Eckler. Sukar or Sasani Shishani
The only reasonable answer after that is Justin Jefferson.
he's also a good guru. But
CMC.
this is a guy that sets himself apart from everybody else.
Patrick
Like,
Mahomes.
no one
It's
else
CMC.
compares
It's
to
CMC.
this guy, and it's Travis Kelce. All right, Travis Kelce, tight end number 1. He had 306.5 fantasy points this year. The next guy has 215.4 fantasy points, and the next guy is actually Hawkinson. So, if you drafted Kelce over any of these other tight ends, like, your Kittles or whatever, I think Kelce, you've got to be happy with that production.
How many points different is Hawkinson from Kelce?
Over almost
like
100.
90 points. Yeah, 90 points.
What week did we get Hawkinson from the Lions?
Week 9 or something. We'll get into that. I actually let's not spoil or anything because I have some more Hawkinson talk later.
Interesting.
But you guys are double dipping.
Interesting things in play right now.
Stop this train of thought and immediately end this right now.
All right. Okay. Your turn.
All right. So your fantasy guru went to Kelce. Understandable, man. He's so far beyond the best tight end. And again, he's another guy because he goes in the first round that I'm like, God damn, do I want to spend the capital on a tight end in the first round? But all he does is produce. And he's just so much better than the next best guy that it's always a value to draft him. And I say all that. And next year, I'm more than likely probably not going to draft him. So.
No, you're going to draft him. He's going to get hurt. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. It's
That's usually what happens.
All right. My first award is the Cliff Diver.
The cliff diver, which means he fell off a cliff big time. It's got to be Russell Wilson.
Yeah, obviously it's fucking Russell Wilson. I have to double dip. It was the Cliff Diver Award for Russell Wilson, who finishes the year as quarterback 16. And you're right, Shovid. You make a great point about, ADP is important when you evaluate how well a season turns out for a player, right? And Russell Wilson was probably the 9th or 10th, maybe the 8th or 9th quarterback that gets drafted in fantasy football this past year, but he finishes his QB 16. He has, for the first 8 to 10 games, maybe one top 20 quarterback finish. So it wasn't even like there were weeks where he was going to surprise you and do well. It wasn't until the very fucking end of the season that he even had a decent performance. So, for a guy that coming into the season, his draft, where his ADP was, I personally felt like had insane amounts of value because you're getting all these quarterbacks and you have Russell Wilson falling as the 9th quarterback when he statistically put up top 5 fantasy quarterback finishes almost every year he plays. I thought the value was there, and he's going into an offense that already has solidified receivers, that has a great defense. He's the missing piece. And for him to just completely poo-poo the bed, he might as well, this season have changed his profession to a professional cliff diver because that dude fell off the biggest cliff I've personally seen in recent memory. Now, hedging myself, that's suffice to say, with the Hackett firing, heading into next season, is there a chance he can be dramatically better? Yes, because he was so fucking bad that it's not hard to be slightly better than this. But do I think we've personally seen the best of Russell Wilson behind us? I do personally think that, but I think he can definitely regain some of that magic and not be the shit show that he was this year. But he gets my Cliff Diver award because, there's nobody that fell off a bigger cliff.
Absolutely. We're seeing Tom Brady kind of fall off a little bit. We're seeing Aaron Rodgers kind of fall off a little bit. Russell Wilson's the next guy up, right?
Yep.
All right. My award is called, you want to see me do it again? Award.
That's definitely Austin Eckler.
No, it's not.
Jalen Hurts?
Nope. Well, I guess I should have said the whole thing. Want to see me score touchdowns? Want to see me do it again?
That's what, because of the first part, I thought it was Austin Eckler, but who am I? Who is it? Jamal Williams.
So no, there's 3 players. I'm just going to tell you. This award, what this means is not multiple touchdowns in a game. That would be Adams. He led the league in multiple touchdowns per game. But the person, what this award means is you scored a lot of touchdowns in your regular team, then you got traded to a new team, and you weren't supposed to do so well, right? But then you did it again. And there's 3 players that get this award, 3 nominees. The nominees are A.J. Brown with 11 touchdowns, Tyreek Hill with 8 touchdowns, and Devontae Adams with 14 touchdowns. That's only 3 less than when he had Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers fell off completely without Adams. Adams said, let's do it again.
Yeah. Those are all great names because those are the three biggest receivers in the offseason that had moved, right? And again, like you said, speculation season begins and you're like, okay, quarterback is inferior to who they were playing with last year. So naturally their stats are going to regress. But the last couple of seasons, I feel like the receiving position, the wide receiver position has shown so much value that, they're the, 3 to 5 most valuable position, outside of quarterback and probably offensive tackle and cornerback, right? It's wide receiver. And, look at these three teams and look at the teams that they left. And all of them, I guess outside of Tyreek Hill, but he was playing with the best quarterback of all time. AJ Brown,
did he get more yards?
He did. But obviously Mahomes' production didn't fall off either, right? So that's an anomaly. AJ Brown left the Tennessee Titans and they could have desperately used a receiver. Yeah. Adams leaves the Packers and Aaron Rodgers would beg. He would be on his knees begging for a receiver like Devontae Adams. So the value that the receiving position has, exemplified the last several years. I mean, again, Jefferson's going to get an insane contract. You have Jamar Chase. You have all these receivers continuing to funnel in that are just insane. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. So again, the receiving position is the best, in my opinion, it's ever been. And, these three guys are the cream of the crop. And all they did was leave their team, provide you, questions as to whether they were going to produce again. And they put all that shit to bed because all they did was just be themselves and produce. Incredible. And I remember we did the wide receiver ranking episode and I was down on Adams and Hill for this exact reason. And I know, Shisho, you weren't as down on Adams at all. And
it was actually pretty close. I was like 5, you were like 6. It wasn't that big of a difference. Chauvin was higher up on Hill than both of us. Yeah, I don't think Chauvin even ranked AJ Brown.
I remember that. I remember Chauvin wasn't as high on AJ Brown. But for me, the whole Adams thing was like a hand-in-hand thing to Derek Carr. And Derek Carr still didn't end up having a top 10 quarterback season that like you would have expected with Adams putting up these numbers, right? But it was just an anomaly that Carr can make Adams have a great year, top 5 fantasy finish, and still Derek Carr's not a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Like those two things can coexist, and I didn't think they could.
Yeah, Derek Carr's no Kirk Cousins every year in the top 10. He's no Kirk Cousins.
He's not.
All right. Okay, so I guess I'm up next. My next award is going to be Let Me Win You Your Fantasy League Award.
Justin Jefferson.
No, it's not Justin
Tony Pollard.
No, it's not Tony Pollard either. But it is another running back.
CMC.
It's not. That's a good one. It's not CMC, but it's the next guy from CMC, which is Austin Eckler.
Okay, goddamn. I was like, I said his name too many times. It's like,
it is Austin Eckler. Eckler is just a people's guy, and first of all, like he cares about your fantasy team. So that you can already feel confident drafting Austin Eckler. But the thing is, like, if it's Austin Eckler in half point PPR and PPR, but like standard, it's Josh Jacobs, right? But in half point PPR, I mean, it was targets after targets. He finishes RB number 1. And the crazy thing is he only had 100 rushing yards, 200 games over 100 rushing yards in the season. But he had 4 games of 32 or more points. So, I mean, he had just a solid PPR game, and it was just a dump off fest to Eckler. So, he's a league winner for sure.
I mean, when you're a running back and you're getting 107 receptions,
it's like a dream come true.
That is a dream. That is a dream for fantasy football. 107 catches for a running back. That's unheard of. Incredible. I mean, the guy defies all odds. I thought the touchdown regression was real. He just went from 20 to 17. So 18 or something. Yeah, 19. Not even a real regression whatsoever. So Eckler, man. Again, we talked about it, Show It. It was an episode, I think, Shisho, you weren't here. But like, how much fun is it to have a guy like Eckler who is like so visibly committed to fantasy football and like doing well for fantasy football owners, plays fantasy football. All he does is talk about fantasy football. Like there's not a better player that you would want to draft because he cares. He cares. And that's like the biggest thing. It's like an era where we see all these players saying, I give 2 fucks about your fantasy team and tweeting that out. Eckler's like, nah, man, I'm going to win you a championship. And what does he do? He just delivers. Like he's the MVP of fantasy football, in my opinion. All right. My second award is the Odd Man Out, not this year award.
Odd Man Out, not this year. So that means it's somebody that typically doesn't do well, but they did. Oh, Geno.
Yeah. Geno Smith?
No, that's a great guess. It's actually going to go to a group, and this award goes to the 2022 rookie wide receiver class, because we had a draft class where, again, this was the first year we like extensively covered preseason and the NFL draft. And my God, guys, like we were talking about receivers that are all absolutely studs. Chris Olave, stud. Garrett Wilson, stud. Drake London, stud. Pickens, stud. Dotson, stud. Christian Watson, stud. Treylon Burks is honestly a stud. His quarterback is just so bad. And like, you know, the only guys that don't make that list are guys who are like Jameson Williams was hurt, right? And he's already freakishly fast. So like the jury's not out on him. Sky Moore, I will say, like he was a little bit of a disappointment to me just because I thought the Chiefs could really use him. But again, Mahomes proves that he can have Justin Watson on the field and he can make catches, you know, like it doesn't matter who's out there. And but outside of that, there's not a receiver that truly like busted. And so it's incredible the depth of this receiving class. It's going to probably go down at this trajectory as one of the best receiving classes of all time. So there was truly no odd man out this year. You drafted a receiver and more than likely they ended up becoming a stud for your team.
Nice. Well-deserved award. Okay. Okay. Head honcho award. I think we've already mentioned these names, but I got 3 names. Can you guess who these 3 names are?
Head honcho, Austin Eckler.
Yeah. Josh Jacobs.
CMC.
3 players from 3 different positions. They're the head honcho, not the second
positions.
Josh Allen.
Travis Kelce, Justin Jefferson.
Travis Kelce, Justin Jefferson, Eckler. Those 3 guys. Touchdown regression didn't exist, right? I have that written down right here. Thanks for saying that out loud before I said that. Justin Jefferson, I mean, what more do you want from a receiver, right? He doesn't get the touchdowns, but you get volume more than any volume I've ever seen in my life. Just so happens to be on your own team, which is great to see. And then Kelce, you know, ADP, like he should be number 1 ADP. Like let's stop fucking around, right? Like what at what point are you like going against the evidence? At what point are you the idiot, right? So,
yeah, me, I'm the idiot. I've been the idiot.
So am I. I look at this and I'm like,
in Kelce's entire career, I have not had him on my fantasy team one time, bro. Damn. There's not been a single season I've had Travis Kelce.
Wow. That's pretty wild. I had the Mahomes Kelce stack last year. Could not complain.
God,
did not complain.
What a stat. Like, at what point am I an idiot? Like, I just refuse to draft
right now.
The best tight end that we've arguably ever seen. Like,
right.
Yeah, it's a very deserving award. Again, these names just continue to be repetitive just because these guys are the outliers in fantasy football and they deserve the recognition. So that's a good award. Head honcho. So
my award, this is going to be a little bit of a surprise. It's called the Letdown Award.
Oh, man.
Letdown. Jonathan.
It's Najee. I can tell by the sadness in his face.
It's not Najee. It's actually, you know, you asked a very good question earlier. You said, what more do you want? And you know what I wanted? I wanted a fan.
Deontay. Stop talking.
It is Deontay. It is Justin Jefferson. Okay, what? It's Justin Jefferson because in week 17, that is most people's finals, right? That's the week that you've reaped the best of Justin Jefferson throughout the whole year, and you're like, you know, winning, getting the most points, and then Justin Jefferson in the last week just doesn't show up, you know, and partly due to the Packers defense. And
I don't like this argument. And it's not fair. This isn't a fair argument. It's up to you to stack up the best team you can stack up to win the game. Did your other team players show up? Was he the only reason you didn't make it?
I mean, he's not the only reason, but he's definitely one of the reasons. I mean, he's the guy that I went and drafted like number 5 overall this year. You know, I expect him in my fantasy to produce and give me the win.
So it's a personal vendetta. This isn't an objective award. This is a personal.
Here's why it makes sense. Because Justin Jefferson's if he's on your team, right? Chances are you're in the finals, right? Like a lot of people that have Justin Jefferson, that they drafted well, you know, you've got the Jeffersons, you've got the Kelce, you probably don't have Eckler because that's too much. But if you have that, then you're in the finals and you expect him to, you know, give you points, and only like, you know, 5 or 7 points in the finals. He let me down, so he gets let down.
Chris Godwin with 7 points. I'd be licking my chops in like week 8.
Yeah, it's tough to hear because he had a historic season, shattered like every Vikings record, and was unbelievable. But you're not wrong. In the fantasy finals, he was probably the biggest, you know, non-performer out of a stud player that you can find. And so, it's that, I hate it. I hate every second of this.
It was a bad game, man. It's not his fault. He didn't drop any passes, right? Like, it's not like it's just the game script went out of hand and shit just went crazy.
But I mean, he's not a guy that you don't start, right? You do.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah,
he's a must start. You know,
build a better roster around him so this doesn't happen. No, I'm just playing. That sucks. That's what happened to me, man. That's what happened to me. But whatever. I'm not as upset because this shit happens all the time. Like, just good players will sometimes just not do well. What are you gonna do?
Justin Jefferson listens to our podcast after breaking every record, and he gets the Letdown of the Year award. The Letdown award, and he's like, "What the fuck are you
of the year?
What are you guys smoking,
dude?" Russell Wilson should be walking out here with 2 awards right now.
I know.
Of the year is kind of a stretch. I agree. It's not of the year because
3.
Justin Jefferson gets you to there, that promised land, the finals. But once you're there, it's like the it's just a letdown.
Yeah, I agree. I get where you're coming from. Sucks. All right, so I'm gonna wrap up our award segment with my final award, and this award is called the Kelsey of the Year.
Kelsey of the Year. Oh my gosh, I know who it is.
It's Hawkinson.
It's fucking TJ motherfucking Hawkinson, who finishes as tight end 2 this year. Kelsey, obviously number 1. The point differential, 261 for Kelsey, 172 for Hawk. So again, 90 plus points almost difference between the number 1 and number 2 tight end. But here's kind of the underlying stuff that's a little bit intriguing heading into 2023. Obviously, Hawkinson had a better year than Mark Andrews, George Kittle, better than Darren Waller, better than Kyle Pitts, right? And what are the possibilities for Travis Kelce if he had played the entire season with the Minnesota Vikings versus the Detroit Lions? Well, I'll tell you guys. So in his 7 games with the Detroit Lions to start the season, his average targets per game, 6.1. In the 9 games that he played with Minnesota, his average targets 9.4, right? That's over 3 more targets a game for this tight end who, again, had weeks where he scored 29.4 fantasy points, had a week where he scored 35.9 fantasy points. But here's the other kicker. Outside of those 2 weeks, he only had 2 weeks where he had double digits and everything else was single digits. So you probably want to extrapolate that over a whole season and want to see more consistency versus like huge boom and huge bust weeks. But he is going into an offense that, on the surface seems like they utilize him more. Detroit became a better offense after they traded Hawkinson. So whatever his role was in that offense just quite frankly wasn't fitting. So give Hawkinson a whole season with KOC, with Kirk Cousins in this offense. And to me, if he stays healthy with how much they threw him the football and the target share that he got, he is basically a guaranteed top 3 fantasy finish, in my opinion, if he does not get hurt, because they have nobody else. We saw what Thielen has become. KJ Osborne has come onto the scene. But again, this team wants to be a throwing first football team, and they utilize Hawkinson the way that, they did the last 5 or 6 weeks heading into next year. To me, TJ Hawkinson is the biggest threat to Travis Kelce's throne.
Okay. Bold statements, and I agree with a lot of it, but you have to remember those 4 players you mentioned. Outside of them, there's something that went wrong with each of those, right?
Correct.
Pitts got hurt, right? Who else? Mark Andrews got hurt and Lamar Jackson died. And then who else do we have here? Who are the other?
Kittle.
Waller.
Going around rotating quarterbacks all year long. Waller played like 3 games, right? So now all those players are going to be back in the picture, and we're going to be going through the same motion again. But the reason I'm, for this conversation is because I've seen enough. Like, I know what my quarterback can do, and I've seen what has elevated his game, and that's having this big, fat, huge, fast piece of man right in the middle of the field, like 10 yards down. And you're telling me this man is a second look after the best receiver in football? Like, sign me up. Like, I will take that. If Justin Jefferson's not open, the ball is going to Hawkinson. Like, that's just how the offense is run. And if you're telling me that that's not as good as, like, these Kittles out there and these Wallers competing with like shitty quarterback situations and all that stuff, none of that exists. We have a stable quarterback situation. We have an elite receiver, and we have our second weapon. Who is that guy? So that clearly just shoots him up above all those other ifs, ands, possible injury situations. It's clearly number 2. Like Andrews is the only one. If Lamar Jackson comes back, I don't care how healthy Lamar Jackson is, he's going to throw the ball to Andrews. Until they get more wide receivers, it's done. It's Hawkinson now. It's no more those other guys.
Yeah, I mean, again, Kittle we already named all the players that he plays with. He's already like the fifth weapon on the team. He's not even getting the first look, the second look, even the third. Yeah, exactly. And you look at Waller, he's become injury prone, right? Obviously, when he came back onto the scene, he looked really good like the latter half of the season. I'm pretty impressed, and it's going to, his stock's going to rise because of that. But there's no guarantee that he's not going to get hurt again. And now, again, as a tight end, he's taking a beating, and he heads into a year where he's another year older. Pitts, who the fuck is his quarterback, right? And until he has a legitimate quarterback, until the Falcons prove that when they have freak athletes on the outside, they know how to get them the football, like there's no stock in Kyle Pitts. So yeah, like you said, what's the one constant? We're going to feed Hawkinson the football. We've already made that clear. Outside of Justin Jefferson, there's nobody else really. So Hawkinson is the guy. And for that reason, again, dynasty leagues heading into drafts next year, Hawkinson should be skyrocketing atop those tight end boards. So he gets my Kelsey of the Year award because he's not quite Kelsey, but he has a chance to be.
Can't you like remember that time where I dropped him and I picked him back up like a week later?
Oh yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Not in retrospect, like
yeah.
It's crazy.
It's the fucking fantasy season. It's so wild. And then the tight end position, right? Like he had a string of single-digit games, so it's not like the drop wasn't warranted. Yeah, he dropped his ass because that's what tight ends are.
And then he got 33.
Well. He was dropping passes and things like that. Yeah. And then, you guys just figured out a way to make it work.
Yep. So that is the final award, guys. And that wraps up a long episode where we recapped all of week 18. Do you guys have any final words as the regular season comes to an end?
Yeah, I had one award that I didn't write down here. It was called the Old Yeller Award, just for funsies. Could you guys guess who that is and why?
No, somebody killed somebody off. Like he's done. Like his career's over.
Yeah.
He's been killed off. I don't know. Who is
He's there for moral support and love.
Oh no.
It's Adam Thielen.
Oh no!
Thank you, Old Yeller. You've always been my favorite, but you know how this goes.
Yeah, that's sad. It is sad. I mean, and the advanced numbers support it, right? He can't get separation anymore. Like he was an amazing route runner, and that's why he got separation. Now he can't get separation, and he became touchdown dependent. And when he can't get separation, now he's not scoring his touchdowns either. So his fantasy numbers just took a huge dive. And again, emergence of TJ, emergence of KJ possibly. That just means Thielen goes down and down in the pecking order. And for an aging wide receiver, a $20+ million cap hit next year, I don't think so.
Yeah, he doesn't have a J.
He might even not be a Viking heading into next year.
Yeah, he doesn't have a J. It's just TJ, AJ, or TJ, JJ, and KJ.
What's his middle name? He should be AJ if he had a J middle name, but he probably doesn't.
Hey, but you know what rhymes with all of that is DeAndre. So, hey, you guys could be in the mix for Hopkins.
Stop it.
We're not getting Hopkins. If we got Hopkins, it would be over, but we're not getting Hopkins.
Don't do this.
That is it, guys. That's the episode. Thank you guys so much for sticking through it. Hope you had a successful fantasy football season, hoisted that trophy. If not, hopefully you learned a lot and you're ready to start the offseason heading into 2023 fantasy football season. Obviously, fantasy football is over. That doesn't mean you can't play DFS. That doesn't mean you can't play on Prize Pick, Underdog, do all that cool stuff for the playoffs. But again, we're not going anywhere. Playoffs are around. We're going to recap or preview the first round probably on Friday. Again, I'm Sweetcar. That is Shovit. We are the only playbook. Thank you guys for sticking through another long-winded episode. Have a fantastic week, and we will be back on Friday.